And there we go. Welcome everybody to another watch party here.
Hey,
We have. Go ahead, Roger. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, hey, all. Good afternoon.
We got a nice present in the fact that Pluto updated their free Star Trek episodes from season 1 to season 2. So we have a bigger pool to choose from right now than we had before, because we actually watched quite a few of season 1. So today's special episode is the Doomsday Machine, which I recently did a slight package on, like a 3 or 4 minute package at most, showing you all of the original shots that were filmed with the Enterprise model back in the 1960s that were used in this particular episode. As a result, I discovered in my research, which really shouldn't have surprised me, is there are more shots of the Enterprise and more footage of space movement vehicles and such in this episode than in any other Star Trek episode. If you just cut out everything except Enterprise on-screen appearances, it comes into right around 4 minutes. And on a lot of the episodes I look at, I'm lucky if I can come up with more than a minute worth of stock footage that they used. So it's pretty slick. Looking down the window for a second, let's see what we got. So Tim and Manley, welcome. Those two gentlemen, man, they were in the hallway talking to each other while we were waiting to come on about, this. Tim says this is his favorite TOS episode, and Manley was asking him, okay, what are the things you like best about it? And they talked a little bit back and forth, but I think both of them have touched on one of the things that makes this episode truly special in the history of Star Trek, and that is that the performance of William Wyndham as Commodore Matt Decker. And more importantly, and Manley, you nailed it in the comments, and that is if there's ever been an on-screen depiction of PTSD that was better than what William Wyndham gave us, I've never seen it since before or after. You could feel the manic depression just ripping through his soul as he did these parts. And this is probably the very first Star Trek episode that I'm upset that we have to use the screenshot thing in order to keep Paramount at bay or whatever, because that scene really deserves to be seen as that scene. And so having to watch it as screenshots while we talk about it is going to be very disheartening. But hey, we do what we can to keep the lights on.
Right.
Let's see what we got. I just want to catch up in here. So this is something Manley said. Until he was in college, he realized Decker was broken and was a broken Kirk and not a weak-willed failure. Exactly. I mean, at one point, you know, depending on how you look at it, and I think Manley's touched it because basically by the time you get to college, your world outlook has changed. We've grown up, okay? And what we realize is there's mainly, I can't believe we haven't stumbled across this comment before, because it's pretty mind numbing, and you've done this to me before, and that is that there is a difference between broken people and weak-willed people. They may appear to be the exact same thing on the outside, someone who seems to be ineffectual or something, but what's inside determines whether they're broken or whether they're just weak-willed. And I never heard it put that way before, Manley. So thank you, because that's something I want to remember going forward.
I think that, too, I think another point with that, Jim, is, a failed individual is somebody who's already just given up. And with and it would be the same way with Kirk, but with Decker, you still see him trying to come to terms with what he's been through. There's that internal turmoil, and he's still trying to process it. He still can't get over it. He's just fighting it, and he can't get over it. And I think that's the difference right there.
So I just want to teach another few people. SF 1987 is with us again this week. Good to see you there.
Yep.
This is really neat. We got ourselves a friend from the Czech Republic. Welcome. Sorry that it is time shifted in the wrong time of day for you. We are very, very happy, though, that you came and joined us.
Yes, absolutely.
And look forward to chatting with you as we go on about our merry way in this episode. Let me see. Have you guys seen the fan episode? Yes, that was. I'm pretty sure that Manley's referring to the episode that the Strange New Worlds. Sorry, the Phase 2 team did.
Phase 2, yeah.
Phase team did in upstate New York,
Yep.
And yes, Wyndham was good in that too. Wyndham is just. But that didn't surprise me because by the time he did that, we were old enough that we knew exactly what kind of masterclass he had put on in the Doomsday Machine. Yes. So seeing his performance in Phase 2 didn't necessarily impress me as much as reinforced to me that I expected this kind of professionalism out of him.
Right.
And it's kind of sad because I think that for folks that aren't Gen 1 or folks that or that aren't Gen 1 or folks that had just are Gen 1 but never watched Star Trek in its original run and picked up only with Next Gen going forward, right, that they may not have, if you had not seen the Doomsday Machine and then you watched Star Trek Phase 2 on YouTube or wherever you saw it, it probably wouldn't have had anywhere near the impact that it had as you were being familiar with the Doomsday Machine. And as crazy as it sounds, because we live in a world that Star Trek's been translated into, 174 languages and everybody on the planet seen it or whatever, there are a significant number of people on YouTube right now that are very familiar with Next Generation footage forward and not all that familiar with TOS. Simply because there are quite a few younger people out there who just simply have no interest under normal circumstances to go dumpster diving in 60s television entertainment, especially when they know that 7 years of Next Gen, 7 years of Deep Space Nine, 7 years of Voyager, 4 years of Enterprise, they have enough Star Trek to last them a lifetime.
Exactly.
And so as a result of that, there's quite a few people out there that probably watched Phase 2 that had not seen William Wyndham's performance. And that's a shame because I wouldn't want people to just assume that the performance was just what was expected. It was so much more than what was expected.
Oh, absolutely.
Andrew, this is easily a top 10 TOS episode. Great action. William absolutely steals the show. No argument there, Andrew. Welcome.
Yep.
Let's see what we got. I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anybody out here before we get started. Okay, good. I think I'm caught up on messages. So for those of you, hold on, I did miss some stuff. Jacob. 2300 nights. It's quite late. Anyway, I'll be watching my first stream on this channel. Well, we hope that you really enjoy it. So let me explain a little bit to people like you and others that have never joined us before. You're a Trek World virgin, let's call that. The way that the watch parties work is I give you a link, and the link that you can go to, and it's is watch.trek-world.com. Now, I have to give a little bit of of caution because folks like you have communicated to me on previous ones that just because Pluto, which is where I'm pointing to Strange New World, to Doomsday device, the Doomsday Machine, I've got that pointer goes to the Doomsday Machine on the US Pluto site. It'll automatically begin playing the episode. It may ask you if you want to join or log in. You can disagree with everything and say no, and it'll still let you watch the episode. Those links don't always go to Star Trek's episode of Pluto in other countries. Len, I think one of our Canadian folks, was the first one to tip me off that Canada did not. It looked fine, but it took you into Pluto and there was no Star Trek episode there.
Right.
So, Jacob, you might be in a similar circumstance. And the reason I'm going through this is because we are not allowed to show the episode on the screen as we're watching it. So it's not like when you see people do reaction videos and they play a music video in a corner and you and they watch it together. Right. When we're dealing with major motion picture, CBS, Paramount, Viacom, all those other companies out there, it is illegal to rebroadcast content. It's far more illegal to do that than it is to actually pirate the content, which is one reason why they always have that big the big warning at the beginning of physical media that you buy, telling you, hey, you know, this is an FBI seriousness. You cannot retranslate, rebroadcast. They were aiming for, originally, people used to, like at sports bars, used to buy the latest sports pay-per-view, and all of their customers could see it for free. The Fed stepped in and stopped that. Now, for that reason, at about 15 minutes past the hour, I start the episode, and it's going to show up on the screen as a series of 15-second screenshots. So every 15 seconds, that screen is going to update itself, and it's going to give you a running timer at the bottom to let you know at what point we are in the episode, so that if you choose to open up and watch that episode on another window, if you're using an iPad or a laptop, you can set up the windows side by side. If you're using an Apple TV or a Chromecast or Fire, you can watch them on. You can go and watch them on that. So if you choose to, you can stay in sync with us, so that you can follow. You know, because if you're watching on Pluto, you're going to be watching something that has commercials, whereas the image that I'm using to make my screenshots doesn't. So the further we get along into the 52 minutes of the episode, the little bit further off we'll be, because we're moving a little bit faster than you if you're watching it on Pluto. But that's how this scenario works. The true gold worth digging for here is the interaction that we have together as we discuss why these particular episodes touched us the way that they did.
Exactly.
And so Tim says, I saw it on October 27th, 1967, and he's watching on Paramount Plus. 11 p.m. in Czechoslovakia. Manley's still talking about the Phase 2 sequel.
Yeah.
Oh, he's talking about something that was done out of Neutral Zone.
Oh.
Tell me more, Manley. It shows.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Beaming the crew to the planet. So, yeah, let me know, because I'm curious. I'll go dig that up. But the reason I'd like to know more is because obviously Star Trek Continues has been gone for quite a while from down there. Right. But a lot of other fan films are still filmed from there. And I believe they've actually I believe they lost their lease on where the set was, because there was this tremendous amount of gravitas in the air about what was going to happen and where it was going to go and how much people are going to be charged for filming on the set. Because, folks, it's not like these sets are available for free. They cost money for rent and electricity and insurance and all that stuff, even if you're running a $0, no profit organization for fan films.
Right.
So, yeah, so Manley, do you mean the one where they go back in time and Commodore Decker left a tape for his son and the lady from Mirror Mirror, isn't it? Okay, I definitely will have to go check that out.
I think
if it was filmed in Neutral Zone, I'm sure that it's in there. I'm sure in addition to whatever channel that got it, like I think the Exeter still films down there. I'm sure that in addition to that, it'll be on the Neutral Zone channel as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start this little fella.
I think I know what Jim and I will be watching together one of these nights we chat.
Yes. And here we begin. In the beginning of these things are always a little bit anticlimactic, because now I'm waiting. So.
That opening shot of the Enterprise head on is one of the great shots from the film library. It really is.
I've often wondered why, and it might have been documented maybe in some of the These Are the Voyages book by Cushman.
Mm-hmm.
I've often wondered why we occasionally see that blonde-haired lady or another blonde-haired lady that might look just like her sitting at the communications console instead of Michelle.
Yeah.
This is the middle of season 2. By this point, it's blatantly obvious Nichelle is in fact a regular cast member.
Cast member, yeah.
So when they write an episode and then they produce an episode where they deliberately sit another actress at her seat, that is deliberate move. And so I'm curious as to why they would choose to do that.
Well, knowing Roddenberry, it could have been a personal reason too. You never know.
Okay, so Manley says they moved it, believe it or not, up towards your way, Roger. They moved it from Georgia to Ohio.
Sandusky, Ohio. Interesting. Well, that's closer.
So, Manley, let me know if you get a chance. I mean, does that mean they sold it to somebody? Because I can't. It's possible, but I can't picture the guy that owned the studio and all that and the sets and stuff down there was wanted to pick up and move to Ohio from that area of Georgia because that's typical retirement country.
I'm curious, is that Vic that owned that, or was there like a
no? Vic did not have. Yeah, he didn't have any part of it.
Oh, okay.
There is the way it was explained to me as recently as last September when we did Trek Nashville, when Creation came to Nashville.
Right.
One of the supposed the gentleman that I met with at that convention said he was one of 8 people that owned Neutral Zone Studios.
Ah, okay.
So, maybe it transferred from one of them to, maybe they lived dispersed throughout the United States. I'm not sure. This gentleman that we met did not. He was from the Georgia area, but he did tell me there were a total of 8 people who owned it.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Because that had to cost a chunk of change to build all that.
Hey, Jay Rocker, nice to see you.
Hey, Jay Rocker.
Manley says Neutral Zone didn't sell, but the Georgia facility terribly, and they got some great deal in Sandusky with air conditioning.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. But somebody still has to relocate for that.
Yeah.
Because somebody still has to relocate for that because somebody's going to have to be so I hope that, and I'm sure it probably did. Even if you're zero profit, you still have to have a business plan.
Yep.
So the cost of moving that thing all the way up there and reconstructing it, and then there's the question of would the people who filmed in Georgia, would they themselves now be able willing to travel to Ohio, after having it in their backyard, let's say for 10 or 15 years? It's going to be interesting, but I'm glad to see that it found a place to go, Manley. Thank you, because I know that was a big thing. And then, of course, there is still the whole argument, in all honesty, that it's not entirely legal. It's not licensed, and Cawley's paperwork shows he has an exclusive license. But I'm not going to get into that because James already fights that battle on his own every chance he gets. So I'm going to let him carry that in there. I'm just happy there's more than one place to look at. And I honestly do believe that historically, Star Trek Continues could not have happened in Ticonderoga. It could not have happened with James Cawley. The creative differences that existed in James Cawley's organization the entire time, with people with guest stars and castmates and crew members openly describing the almost constant state of war between different people who were in charge all the time that didn't agree with each other, shows that there was no way they could have worked out something that would have allowed Vic the creative control that he needed to do what he ended up doing with Star Trek Continues. So I'm glad he was able to find something in the Exeter sets at the time to use, but more importantly, I'm glad he was actually kind of forced out, because that way he was free to do Star Trek Continues exactly the way he wanted to do it without any compromise to anybody else. And, it's the ultimate put your money where your mouth is, and he did.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. They did a brilliant job. The production team did a brilliant job on the sets, the damaged sets for the Constellation. Even though we know it was just the redressing of the Enterprise sets, they still made it look battle damaged enough that it's very convincing.
Okay, Jonathan, nice to hear from you, my friend. I'm so glad that you've been with us. And I will tell you, I've been having somewhat of a little bit of a sabbatical for the past 3 months. And I'm preparing to retire full time within the year. And when I retire full time, this becomes my only thing in life. But as I'm wrapping things up to get to that point, it has really stretched me thin and pulled me in different directions. So where I'm going with this is not necessarily the second part of your comment, but just a gotcha, a gimme that goes with it, and that is there hasn't been a whole lot of creative content from me since the beginning of the year, and that will change as we approach towards the middle to the end of the year as time frees up for me. So you will see more videos about the studio models, and I've got a big video package coming up on Star Trek Phase 2. I got a video package coming up on a prototype communicator, a unicorn, if you want to consider it that. And then, of course, we've got the full-length documentary, the Galileo documentary history, that'll be released via Kickstarter and an honest-to-God Blu-ray. It'll be an honest-to-God movie that we're releasing. So there's quite going on here. The second part of this comment that I have to chuckle at, I've called and you never pick up. There's a reason for that, Jonathan. That is not a voice phone. It's a Google voice phone number that exists solely basically for people to leave comments, and then I copy those comments and I put them in the new videos as I create them, if those videos are longer than a certain length. Because if I put a 1 minute comment in a video that's 4 minutes long, and then the outcome of the knives and pitchforks, and I have to run. But I have had other people that reach me through there and left messages for me and told me to reach them separately, and that's good. So please do not take any offense to the fact that I don't answer the phone. It is an unmanned line. However, you will find it in use the second part of this year during live streams like this, where we will have it set up so that one of you folks out there who's watching can call and participate on a call, just as if you called into Sirius XM and wanted to talk on your favorite XM radio show.
Coming up on the best scene of the whole episode here with Decker.
I take that as a challenge, Manly. See you in Ohio someday. Well, look at that. Yeah, just look at that. That's that screenshot. That's the beginning.
Yep. He's just kind of coming out of his shock.
Yep. It's like, don't you think I know that?
We couldn't run. That has to be a difficult decision for a captain too, because had the crew remained on the ship, they might have all survived. There's no guarantee, but
yeah, he thought he was doing the opposite. He thought he was giving them a chance to live, that they would certainly die in the ship.
Right.
And then to have the dagger twisted, and this is, again, you guys that have watched the show or heard me many times. This is where Star Trek excels. It excels at the Greek tragedy aspects of life.
Absolutely.
And this is if there's ever been a tragic Greek aspect to a Star Trek episode, this is it right here.
Absolutely.
Your very best plans, what you believe is the best thing you can make to protect your people, turns out to be the thing that actually consigns them to death.
Yes.
You can see right now, you can see his mind cracking right here.
Yep, absolutely. Such a wonderful scene, intense scene too.
Don't you think I know that? A great line. Yep. Michael has joined us. And he said,
Hey,
yeah.
Michael.
He said the cool thing in Ticonderoga is they have the auxiliary control set, and they have the Galileo, and they're building a next gen set.
Nice.
SFF 1987. We all did this. Watching after school and recording on a tape recorder was all we had in the 1980s.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was so funny. It was one of the first things I discovered after talking to the world here on the channel, is that we all had used cassette recorders to record what we found when we watched Star Trek.
Yep. And then we couldn't get my sister to shut up and quit talking while we were trying to record the episode.
I have one phrase running through my head that I'm very happy for, and that is I was watching The Trouble with Tribbles, and I had the cassette recorder stood up that in front of the TV set. And of course, back in the old days, we had the little mic recorders that came on a plug that plugged in and sat there, condenser mics.
Right.
And so I'm recording the episode, and my dad goes walking through the living room in the middle of the episode. So, what you doing? Taping it? And I'm going, Dad, of course I'm taping it. I watched that. I listened to that video, that tape so many times as a child because of The Trouble with Tribbles, that I can replay the way his voice sounded in my mind for that one little clip.
Sure.
And now, at 61 years of age, looking back on my life, it's the only thing I can look at pictures, remember what he looks like, but it's the only thing embedded in me that's still him. So ironically, I was not at all happy when he did it, but I'm very happy that he did it. That I had that for years later, because I no longer have my mother's voice in my head anymore.
Right.
And when you lose things like that connect you to your childhood.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, our sister was a lot more ornery than that. She would purposely say stuff just because she knew it was going to show up in the tape later, and I was just like,
yeah.
And the other thing is too, on a 60-minute cassette, you always hoped by some miracle that when the first side was done and you had to pop it out and flip it over to record on the other side, you hoped and prayed it was at a commercial break, and it never was.
Yeah, it never was. Yeah. And you sit there and you stare at the little tape, and you'd see it getting closer and closer and closer. Like,
yes, you're thinking, "Oh, come on, commercial."
And what's really funny is what our kids today, they make these things they call mixtapes today. They have no idea what a mixtape really was. No. Actually, I take the fact they probably, if they'd seen Guardians of the Galaxy, they'd seen a real mixtape, because we created those buggers back in the 70s. They didn't exist before that.
I still have a package of Kmart blank tapes that I've thought in my mind about doing that at one more time, just for nostalgia's sake, is recording an episode of Star Trek in a Kmart cassette, 60-minute cassette, and just having it to remind me of my childhood.
So Jonathan brings up a really good question that I've never considered before. Thank you, Jonathan. Does anyone else feel like the episode where Kirk sports the wraparound are better on average? Now, we've talked a bit about the wraparound.
Yeah.
I mean, The Enemy Within. This obviously, it's shown up in like it shows up in Charlie X by accident, in my opinion. And it did actually get used. 2 different versions of it got used in all 3 seasons.
Right.
But he may be onto something there, because it seems to me that I seem to remember a lot of iconic moments that we had, that I have photographs and stuff like that of Kirk. He's in the wraparound at the time that the photos are taken. And I never really considered that before.
I don't know. There's so many, first season episodes that were so great, and he was wearing the original. tunic that he wore. So I don't know. You know.
So Manley has now. Oh, I made it go away. Let me bring it back.
I was gonna say I was trying to read it, and then it went away.
Manley has now got Barry Manilow running through my head because he had a hit song in the 1980s called "The Old Songs," and one of the things he said is if it didn't work, then maybe I'll put on the old 45s, and then maybe the old songs. Yeah. I remember stacking up 45s. You had the little adapter in the center. If you're lucky enough to have the one that dropped them one at a time, so you'd have to change them all the time. Right. And man, it was something.
Absolutely.
I think it would be I can't even imagine what it would be like to talk to a Gen Z person now and explain to them that there were 3 primary speeds of vinyl, and that each one of those primary speeds basically appealed to a different audience. 45s were American Top 40. They were designed for the your top 10 hits. 33s, the long play album, generally for the people who were fans specifically of certain singers or certain kinds of music. And then 78s were mainly for classical and the real older stuff that we simply just didn't get redone at 33. There was no point in redoing them. They used the 78s and they were a little bit bigger, not a whole lot bigger. So remember, they fit in the same things.
Right.
But yeah, I can imagine trying to explain that to a Gen Z person and just watch their eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's one. Hold up. There you go. Tim. And I think Tim actually started that. I think he actually started typing that as I was beginning my conversation. So Tim, I think it was thinking along the same way.
Actually, to be honest, though, or to be accurate, isn't it 33 1/3?
Yes.
Not 33? Yeah. It's 33 1/3, 45 and 78.
Yeah. And I'm not quite sure why. I'm sure there's a mathematical algorithm in there somewhere that determined that. Yes. Because that's not something that you just do on your own.
No, exactly. Deliberately playing records at the wrong speeds to the singer sounded like the Chipmunks.
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, Alvin and the Chipmunks. Makes me wonder if Alvin and the Chipmunks, if they actually they came across that idea real early back by doing that.
That could very well be. I haven't read anything to that effect, but it's very possible.
Oh, so. James K says there were 16s for spoken word. Oh. I did not know that.
I know that, yeah.
I'm curious, James, did they like show up maybe right after the cylinders finally got, because I know the cylinders were used right around to about the turn of the century, because I remember even seeing them in junk shops when I was growing up. But I never saw 16s, but I'm wondering if maybe they were the first vinyls of some type.
Well, I know for like dictation, like office use and things of that nature, dictation, they usually use cylinders because you could record your own. That was back in like the 30s and 40s. Yeah. 50s.
The dictation machines, yeah.
Yeah. Dictaphones or whatever they call those, yeah. The wire recorder. Yeah. Yeah. Boy, McCoy gets into it with Decker in this scene.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because that's very interesting in the way that McCoy approaches the situation with Decker versus Spock.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Michael says Decker's pulling rank. You betcha he is.
Yeah, he is.
I think it's very important to remember that as we watch this and you experience that scene, I think it's very important to remember that I think at all points Decker always still thought he was doing the right thing.
Oh yeah. I think Jim, though, that one of the points, and you can see the frustration in McCoy's face when he tells McCoy, you can leave the bridge, And the frustration being, he thought, well, McCoy or Spock tells him, if you can prove that he's medically unfit for command, I could relieve him under Section C. And McCoy's like, I'll do that right now. And then he tells him, you'd be asked to produce your records. And that's where I think McCoy's frustration comes from, because he was in such a hurry to run up to the bridge when they got out of the transporter to find out what was going on, that instead had he followed orders, or had he followed his protocol, he would have taken Decker directly to medical, given him a physical and a mental exam, and then would have had those records to use later. But he didn't do that.
Yeah.
McCoy, being the highly emotional individual he is, he rushed to the bridge with Decker, to see what was going on.
James brought up a really good point. All the things that are like classic in this episode.
Yep.
And this is probably the only episode out of all the originals in my mind at this age that I could hear in my head the sound, the music, like he says. And as the ships are maneuvering around and coming at it, I can hear that passage, that tone that they used over and over again.
Right.
I don't think I can identify any other episode of Star Trek that a specific scene evokes the memory of the music of the scene. Oh yeah, Amok Time, when they were fighting in Amok Time. But this is definitely the winner.
Well, there's a specific section of music in this episode that always, I just love it. It always, there's something about this, but it's when Decker knocks out the security guard and he steals his phaser and is running down to the Galileo, or running down to the hangar deck. There's the music playing in the background is just like this. You can tell there's something going on. If you were in another room and you heard that music, you would rush in to see what's taking place.
Yeah,
it's that kind of music that
it's a chapter.
Yeah.
They're talking about the theme that they used in Jaws.
Yeah.
And I saw a meme the other day that I thought was really funny. So I'm getting ready to launch a series of memes throughout Facebook and stuff for the Trek World stuff, and I'm trying to do them in a pattern type of thing. I just don't want to flood memes everywhere, but memes of a certain content or a certain type.
Sure.
The first set that I'm probably going to do are probably going to be the memes that are built around Elam Garrick from Deep Space Nine. Yep. But there was a meme the other day that I thought was hilarious because I can't remember what was actually on the scene, but the text, and it said, how is it that people still get attacked by sharks? And then that's at the top of the meme, down at the bottom, it says, don't they hear the music? Okay, well, that's a good point there.
Yeah. Oh, my. Oh, golly.
Yes, there have been guards posted on the bridge before this in season 1. I'm trying to remember. I know there was one potion. There was one station on the bridge, I think, in Where No Man Has Gone before. But basically, you would see them. They were red shirts, and you would basically see them standing against that blank wall that's right on the right-hand side as you come out. The left-hand side as you come out of the turbo lift. So as Kirk and company come out of the turbo lift and turn right, you step down the steps to get into his chair. On the left-hand side, right up against this wall, there quite often you would see a gentleman in a red shirt, and he would be standing at like parade rest. He'd be standing with his hands crossed behind him in your typical military stance.
Right.
But they were used very infrequently, to the point that I think they may not have ever been used based off of how Gene Kuhn or Gene Roddenberry or Bob Justman felt about it. I think they literally were just used at the whim of possibly the director and definitely just the writers.
Yeah. Jim, this scene makes me wonder. We've determined that Enterprise that's in this shot is the 4-inch, or not the 4-inch, but the little metal one.
It's the 3-inch metal one, yeah.
Yeah. makes me wonder if that's 1-to-1 ratio with the Doomsday Machine, because they didn't need to film. It didn't need to be huge. They were going to film it separately and put it together with something. This is really the only scene where the two are in the same shot together.
You know, it is possible that it could very well be. My original thought was that they had composited in, but now that you mention that, they had never filmed the 4-inch metal Enterprise as an Enterprise before, so it had never been a soundstage. It wasn't available to composite, so they had to film, even if they just did a really short clip that they could work in, because they wanted to be able to show some movement. They had to film that, and in order for it to be ready for this episode, and they had to fill the Doomsday Machine itself for this episode. I've seen a lot of photos of the effects set when they still had the Doomsday Machine model on the set. It just takes a photograph of the blue screen behind it.
Right.
I never even considered what you just said until you said it, and I'm thinking, yeah, that might be, because to the best of my knowledge, the only other time that there was ever another studio model filmed in the same shot as the Enterprise was when the Botany Bay was filmed for Space Seed.
Yes.
They were filmed together, and we have plenty of photographs to prove that, and behind-the-scenes footage. And that is actually denoted as being the only time it's ever happened. But in all honesty, I think it's possible that it might have happened with a 4-inch, but nobody in Star Trek production or in history, even now, this far along, ever really thought of it when they made the statement of this is the only time, because there's a good chance that maybe the 4-inch had been filmed that way, but nobody's going to remember it that way, because it never crossed my mind until you asked the question.
Yeah, and it did recently, within the last year or so. I've thought about that when I've watched this episode. It made me wonder, because they were shooting the Doomsday Machine itself for the first time, and they wanted something to, obviously had to have the Enterprise in a shot, or wanted to have it in a shot. And normally they would take the two separately and composite them. But since we've been told that that's the 4-inch model, that I'm guessing they were shot together.
Yeah, that's the 4-inch there.
Otherwise, they could have just taken a side shot of the 11-foot model, and I'm sure they could have done something to shrink it down. Maybe, I don't know, to composite it with the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, because it actually does look to me like a little bit like it was composited. It doesn't look like, if they put them together, I'm not sure that the 4-inch, it would be in the same that it would have the correct aspect ratio, size ratio.
Yep.
I do want to step back though, because got several people following up. We're talking about Jaws again. So SWAT Cats, hey SWAT Cats, I missed you so far this week. When Steven Spielberg heard the theme song for Jaws, he said to John, "Really?" Later, when Steven saw the finished film with the theme song, he apologized to John about it. Yep. And then what else did I see? So this one disturbs a comment. Interesting use red phasers sprang here, but they remastered using the blue phasers. I think they made the conscious decision also to try to stick with blue for phaser fire during the remasters.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that they redid that with blue, and I would bet you that they also, and this is something I have to go take a look at because it would be in Balance of Terror, I guess. That episode was famous in the original FX for having what first time they were called, I believe, proximity phasers. Yeah. And they sounded like photon torpedoes.
Right.
They looked like little burst phasers. I don't know what they did with them during the remaster, if they just simply made them the blue phasers and did anything about it, or did they do something special, because I don't believe they changed any of the lines in the episode. So they would still have been referred to as proximity phasers, even though the concept really doesn't make any sense. How do you have an energy weapon that's proximity? But yeah.
Right.
Let's see. I just want to make sure somebody else says it. Are there any behind the scenes? Yes, there are behind the scene photos of the Doomsday Machine model up in front of blue screen on what I believe is film effects of Hollywood soundstage. I may have a few of them up on the Pinterest page. I think we got. I think I've used at least some screenshots of them in a couple of videos.
Yeah, I think you have, Jim.
This is an episode that was improved by SFX. Actually, I want to point out too that this episode inspired the fact that Star Trek could be remastered. Period.
Yeah.
Because when the decision, which was not a Paramount or a CBS decision, the decision was, hey, look what I can do. And I believe it was Darren Dockerman that did it. I know that he's the one that headed the restoration remaster stuff. Michael Hodges could probably jump in there and confirm to me whether it was Dockerman or not, but I'm pretty sure it was Dockerman. But somebody went out and they said, look at what I can do just with what I have available to me. And those clips are up on YouTube. They're still available. You just got to go searching for them. And they sometimes get lost in the noise because normally when you search for alternative FX from Star Trek or whatever, you get the original or you get the remastered. But the original stuff that was shown as like a proof of concept, this was the episode that was used to make the sales pitch that, okay, this is viable and it could look pretty darn good.
Right.
Perspective. My favorite line here, Sky, you just earned your pay for the week. And then Jonathan goes, but wait a minute. I thought there wasn't any money in space. That's because Roddenberry kept it all. Well, not only that, there was also a line in a later episode where Kirk is criticizing Spock. He says, do you know how much money, Starfleet is invested in you?
Yeah.
And that's the wrong question to ask a Vulcan because he got an answer. But I mean, yeah.
To the penny, he got answered.
Yeah. I like that. I had noticed that, Michael, but didn't really register with me. Nahara will not stay seated. She is constantly standing up. Correct. Yeah. She's in the background of a lot of these screenshots we're looking at in the act of standing up or rising out of her chair.
Right.
I like Darren's effects real better. What was true, the original. Hi, Dining. Sorry that you joined us late, but yeah, if we actually put it on to watch this, I would be not only guilty of copyright infringement, but the FBI would actually have me as a felony crime. You cannot rebroadcast television on a YouTube channel. So we're stuck with doing screenshots and using the link that I gave you for watch.trek-world.com. So that we can watch it together. The screenshots are meant to be somewhat of a shorthand, and we actually probably the vast majority of people that watch this every other week with us probably don't actually even watch the link anymore. We just talk about what we see on here. So sorry it was a little bit different than what you expected. That is a common, your reaction is a very common reaction because it's not something, from one of the things, it's not something a lot of channels do. You don't see very many other channels out there saying, hey, let's watch this episode or this movie together. So when you stumble across something like this, yes, we're a little bit different than you expected. But you are more than welcome. We are so glad that you joined us because it's really about the talk that's going around the campfire. It's not really about the episode as much as it is our experiences and our thoughts and our memories and what made this episode important to us. Imagine we were all in one room at a Star Trek convention while it was playing up on the screen, and we get to be able to talk like that. That's basically what this is.
This security guard, I can't recall his name off the top of my head. He was also in the episode Operation Annihilate. He was one of the 5 guys with the big lucite rods that were coming down to attack Kirk and the landing party as they were getting ready to head into the building. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was in several episodes.
Aha! There's one of those scenes we were talking about not too long ago where they're coming up or coming down a ladder.
Ladder, yep.
Coming down the ladder was an easy one to shoot. Coming up from the ladder, well, that one took a special spot on the step set to be able to do it. And I gotta put James's comment up there because that's totally not It is so amazing what they got. Now here's something, and I call this out in the video that I made. They actually show you, in this case, we're looking at the left-hand side of the AMT model of the Enterprise that was damaged. And a few times in this episode, you switch from the left to the right-hand side, and they didn't flip the film. They actually did film both sides, and you can tell because the amount of damage in the spots that it's damaged in on this secondary hull, but in particular on the saucer.
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
So, ironically, for a show that was world-renowned for needing to pinch pennies, we could have easily forgiven them just if they had flipped the tape backwards on an AMT model and figured, oh, what the heck. But they actually took the time to film it both ways.
Well, and they could too because it wasn't lit. So the left side was, both sides were available versus the 11-foot model.
So James has brought up something that I've never discussed on the channel before because I think that it gets, I think that the best way to discuss it is to discuss it in like an anthology, sort of like what I do with the little short videos on what special effects and stuff. Every episode was known as the decades went by for having specific things cut from it for syndication.
To make room for commercials.
And one of the things that a lot of people noticed is what James is talking about, and that is that usually the stations chose a lot of the exact same material to cut. So like you said, the Decker sneaking around stuff, that's easy to jettison because you can get rid of that. It doesn't even really affect the stories. You can regain enough, you can cut those out and probably get a 30-second commercial in there and get paid, whatever it was, $10,000 for 30 seconds back then, whatever it was, I'm not sure.
Right.
It also explains, I love these OG shots of the Galileo.
Yeah.
Because there aren't that many of them in existence anymore. And a lot of the episodes that you find, when you do see the OG version like that, you can actually see the boxes around them as they added them in. And for those of you who are wondering, what you're watching here, by the way, this is the videos that I crop up for this stuff are actually made from the masters of the VHS tapes. I do not use the DVD original effects. When my particular library that I built on my end here that I use for these kind of videos, when I say I'm looking at an original effects version, non-remastered of the episodes, I'm looking at the master that was used for the Columbia House VHSs. Because the very first DVD release in the late 1990s had already, in fact, been remastered, had been rescanned and remastered. And if you're lucky enough to own one of those DVDs from that set, it actually tells you right on the box it's remastered. It's just that, about four or 5 years later, the Blu-ray remasters came out. And so most people tend to think of, when you mention the word remaster, they think specifically of those sets that came out after the year 2000. They don't really recognize the fact that 2 years before that, in 1998, they were remastered. And it was those remastered versions that were also shown in syndication. And they went through the Sci-Fi Channel, actually, on 2 separate runs before they would go into long-term syndication.
Right.
Money, money, money.
Makes the world go round. Well, that Galileo in front of the side shot of the Galileo going into the Doomsday Machine. Well, that Galileo looked awful big, didn't it? So,
artistic license.
Yeah.
So Manley's been having a discourse with a couple of them. It caught him a little bit off guard that their differences slightly. Manley, on a lot of the times that you look through conventions or online sites or eBay, and you're looking at film clips that are being sold that are 16 millimeter instead of 35 millimeter, you're looking at film clips that were created by the local station when they received the 16 millimeter prints of Star Trek for syndication, and they would cut out sections in order to go ahead and put their commercials in. And just as Gene made money by selling the 35 millimeter clips, other people around the country, the local people to these TV stations, whatever, suddenly you started to see these 16 millimeter film clips show up at conventions and stuff being sold. And that was where they came from. They originated from the syndicated cuts. And that's one of the things that makes them really interesting, is because they could be cut from at any part in the episode. Now, obviously, it would only make sense to cut them from the end or the beginning of a scene, because you cut it in the middle of the scene, it'd be sort of dumb, because people would be upset with you for sticking a commercial right there. Hey, Len, I'm sorry I missed you. I spoke about you not a few minutes ago. I'm sorry, I must have missed you in the thing. I do go back and rescan these quite often while we're talking. So
great to see you again, Len.
So James actually has spotted a point. I have to go look for that, where Scotty's accent drops for just a minute.
Somebody, and I'm not sure if this is what James is talking about. People brought up the fact that, when Scotty's explaining, flipping the switch to, set the timer to blow it up, 30 seconds later, poof, and somebody said, "Well, he lost his accent during poof." I'm like, poof is a sound. There's no accent to it. It's not a word. You can't have an accent in a sound. That doesn't make sense. So
it's kind of funny.
Yeah. The sentence before that, yes, he does drop some of his accent, but I remember once person specifically calling out the poof, and I'm like, well, you don't have an accent with sounds.
Yeah, Manley, there were a bunch of these mini Genes running around the country. They were also the people that managed to end up with copies of the blooper reels by filming them at conventions. And then, taking them home, developing them, and chopping them up, and then selling them on their own. Now, ironically, it was in the late 1970s that Paramount began putting the smackdown on conventions about showing the blooper reels. And what I found to be most ironic about it was, you would think that the complaints about the blooper reels would have come from the bean counters at Paramount, but they didn't. The initial complaints that were heard rather loudly by fandom and the people who had legal responsibility came from most very, very vocally from Leonard Nimoy and from several of the other cast members. Who said that these were never meant to be seen by the public. They were filmed, so reproducing them and showing them at the conventions was a no-no. Yeah. And there's a story on one website that tells an amazing story behind the scenes of how they did, I want to say, the 76th convention in Toronto. And they go to great lengths on their blog to explain how they were forced to deal with that, because Paramount was quite, by that point, Paramount had said, no, you cannot show these. They're pirated bootleg things. You cannot have them.
Right.
normally you would think that those kind of objections would come up because of profit and marketability, but no, it was brought up ironically because several of the cast were quite vocal about these things really were not meant for public consumption.
Right.
And gentlemen, I suggest you beam me aboard. This scene is mesmerizing to watch.
Yes. We always talk about, we've talked before about the wobble in the constellation model as it's heading in that last scene where it's heading towards the Doomsday Machine. You can see a little wobble in it at one point.
Yep. Mr. Scott.
Try inverse phasing.
You know what's really crazy is the interior of the mall. I still think that's impressive, even by today's standards.
Yeah,
visual
it is.
On a TV show.
Yeah, it is. Do we know how that was done? That effect?
I thought good to see you today.
Oh, there. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Roger. What were you saying?
No, do we know how that center effect was done? Have you heard anything about that?
No. I'm sure it just means I haven't looked into it yet. I'm sure somebody out there probably knows, and I'm sure that's written up in a few things. But
I wonder if it was done with a kaleidoscope, because it almost looks like a kaleidoscope style, like from behind or something.
Maybe they borrowed footage from A Family Affair. Remember the opening intro? Yeah.
Could very well be.
You're in very good company there, my friend. Actually, in two ones. One is a veteran. Yes. Thank you for your service. And yep. Two, a lot of people, this is their very favorite episode of Star Trek. This is a heavyweight. This is not a field, unlike all the other Star Treks that even we like, this is not a feel-good episode. This episode is, to me, in no way feels victorious at the end of the episode, especially when you consider that, at the very last thing that's spoken on the bridge is, do you think they would only ever build just one?
Right.
And even if they did, that was just one civilization.
One other, Jim, similarity this episode has to the movie Jaws. It's the same type of an ending, where they destroy they destroy the creature, or in this case, the Doomsday Machine. But you're right. Neither in Jaws, it wasn't a feel-good ending. With all the people that died and Quinn killed. So
yeah, Manley gives 400 plus Starfleet people. Not no. And it's right up there with they lost the Intrepid. All of its crew was Vulcan, but the entire ship.
Yep. Yep.
There was you think that Star Trek was rough on red shirts. In all honesty, Starfleet has been really, really rough on the original 12 Constitution class starships.
Yes.
To the point that, they actually wrap up the story, granted non-canon, but they wrap up the story and Star Trek continues, around, it's the only one to make it back from its 5-year mission. And I want to say, I think that's actually alluded to in Roddenberry's novelization for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I think at the very least it was the first one to come back from 5 years, although the novelization might actually say that it was the only one. I just know that that's what that elevated Kirk's personal preference at home, or not preference, sorry, his personal, what the people thought of Kirk at home among the Federation citizens versus the bureaucrats. And that's why it became very important for the Federation, for Starfleet, to make sure he doesn't go out and get himself killed. So they kicked him upstairs.
Right. Well, like you mentioned, they lost the Intrepid, they lost the Constellation, they lost the Defiant in the Tholian Web. There's 3 starships out of 13 right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course, yes, Nomad. Len bring up, Nomad killed millions. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. When you look at the total number of deaths, I mean, you've got Kodos the Executioner. I think they said he was between 3,000 and 4,000. I think colonists were sacrificed, for a decision. Ironically, if you look at the idea behind what happened with him and his immediate world,
right,
very similar to what McCoy went through. Kodos made a decision based off the best information he had at the time, and then a supply ship shows up like a month later and renders everything that he did, pointless and now damaging.
Right.
And then McCoy faces the same thing with having to take his father off life support because his father was suffering. Right. Finally making that decision, and then a week later they find a cure. So ironically, that theme has run pretty far.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, I can't remember off the top of my head, but Tim is asking, what was the name of the ship that lost an ultimate computer? Was it the Hood? I don't remember off the top of my head.
Excalibur.
Okay.
Yeah, Hood, the Potemkin, Lexington, and Excalibur.
Okay. So we have wrapped up yet another one of our watch parties. So I want to thank all of you that joined us today. And we had a large turnout today, guys.
Yes.
I would say close to twice the size we normally do. I'm assuming maybe that has been a little bit to do with the nicer weather that we've had that makes us feel a little bit more like participating in the world than we did, say, a month ago. I do want to point out, as we get ready to end this off, I do want to point out that we will, as a channel and as a group of people, be attending Wonderfest the end of next month from May 3rd. We go in from May 31st to like June 2nd. It is in Louisville, Kentucky, right at the airport. If you've never been to Wonderfest, I advise you, if you're within driving distance, get in the car, come on out to Wonderfest next on May 30th or 31st. They do not sell tickets online. You buy tickets when you get there. It is, however, 100% guaranteed. It's not going to be the point where you get there and be told, oh, you waited too long today. You got to wait till tomorrow. They have plenty of tickets. Wonderfest focuses on sculpture, modeling, visual effects, practical effects. It's really on everything that isn't CGI. Okay, and that's not saying that CGI sucks, because some of the greatest proponents of CGI are going to be there as well. Right. But you will see people there from the Star Trek side of the house, like, for instance, Darren Dockerman. Rick Sternbach is going to be there. Robin Curtis is going to be there.
Yes.
So there's quite a few things. So if you do get an opportunity to go out to Wonderfest and see us the end of next month, please be sure to wave one of us down. We'd be tickled to death to talk with you. And maybe swag nearby to give you. Other than that, I think we're just about done. We're at the 1 hour and 9 minute section. So we started the show at like 1 hour and 15. So I got about another 4 minutes, I think, before I definitely kick everybody out and turn off the lights. Just checking to see if anybody else has any. Nice to meet you too. For those of you who joined us for the first time today, it was wonderful to actually have a chance to talk with you. For those of you who are regulars, from Tim to Michael to SF 1987 to Manley to to Jonathan, to all these people that we've seen. If I just left your name out, please forgive me. It was just an old man's rambling. we love the fact that we do occasionally have these opportunities to talk to each other, because it's not the kind of thing that happens on the average YouTube channel. It's really not the kind of thing that happens on any social media channel.
Right.
Can't think of any other major. I can't think of any other social media channel that the viewers and the crew and the people all could come into one area, and you're never quite sure who's going to be in the listening audience. Sometimes we have production people that listen in on these things too. So think of it as like the world's largest AA meeting. Okay, this is a therapy session for everybody that played along with us.
Indeed. Indeed.
All right, so I think hey GSR, it's been a while. I remember quite a few comments that he had from before that. Nice to see you that you made it today. And then Red Shirt Bob, thank you very much. Everybody have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and go and close the doors on this right now. So once again, thank you. For those of you who are patrons, stay in the studio after I stop the live stream and we will continue on. If you're not a patron, you are missing out. And patrons can start at like $2 a month, but I guarantee you there are things that you want to hear that we talk about all the time.
Absolutely.
You know, one of our chief patrons is the chief medical officer in NASA at the Moon to Mars program. So he generally talks to us on these calls right from within mission control. Okay. And then we also have access to other people behind the scenes that do not necessarily want information to be passed publicly, but they talk to me in private. And as long as I don't yell it through a microphone or a megaphone, they're good with talking with me. So you'd be surprised at what you miss by not being in something just as simple as that. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for your time. We love you. We look forward to seeing you again 2 weeks from now. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and click on the end stream button. It's not personal. It's just time to move on.
Thanks, everybody.